Osio Nagawa. That means hello. Say Osio. Osio. Caleb Hickman, Dawado, Inegaganti. Nole Awiditi Dawado, Zalegigant. Dijalega Yele, Kuwayan, Diwatansha, Kuwait, Oklahoma, Diwatansha. I live in Webster, which is also called Tuckasegee Town by some people, or used to. And I'm from Oklahoma, as he said. I'm a citizen of Cherokee Nation, and I'm a biologist, but there's a lot more to me. A lot of times we'll introduce ourselves through our families. You guys all have families, right? So this is a lot of my Cherokee family. I put the prettiest ones up there, as you can tell. My mom's in center, my brothers, cousins, but I even put up some old pictures, some that on the back of them say Indian Territory. So Oklahoma was once Indian Territory. Oh, is it going? Here we go. And my family, we can trace our roots back to Tennessee. A couple of families came over the Trail of Tears. Who's familiar with that? Anybody? Okay. So I don't have to go into a history lesson, I hope. And so my family has been in Oklahoma since before statehood. And now I'm a biologist. I have traveled all over the country, worked in different capacities for universities, feds. I think I've lived in 6 different states over the years. I've been in North Carolina for almost 12 years now, working for the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. And usually you show pictures like this as the charismatic animals that you work with. And as he introduced me, I also work with little animals. And I spent a couple years even working with plants. I have a family. It can be kind of scary to have a family. So if you guys look forward to having families one day, you might deal with this. 2 sons and my wife, but they're also beautiful sometimes. It's wonderful. But I still enjoy catching animals. I take my kids out with me sometimes, but I don't do the dangerous stuff with them. I've worked with animal behavior of animals. I've worked with their interactions with each other, with their ecosystem, and different environments. Speaking of environment, I'm going to ask you to do something. This isn't echoing too much. I want you to do a thought experiment, okay? Can you guys do this with me? Okay, so for just a few seconds, if you can close your eyes, it helps. But I want you to imagine what an environment is. What is the environment to you? Just take a few, like what are the things that go into the environment? What do you see? Try to create a list. What are those things? Okay. Log them in your brain. All right. Okay. Got it? Got it? You guys got it? Okay. All right. Did it look anything like this? Raise your hands. Okay. A little bit like this. So I showed this to my son this morning, and he said, I didn't see that tree in there. What's that weird tree? He's not used to seeing that tree, right? It's not from around here. So maybe it didn't look exactly like this. Maybe, did you have water? Raise your hands. Okay. Plants? Did you have air in it? Okay, a few less. You might have been thinking about air. It's just all around us, right? What about soil? Okay. Did you have animals? Aha, we had some animals. Birds. What about little salamanders? Oh, there were some people that had salamanders. You're cool. Now, did you have people? Not many people had people, right? We don't often consider humans in the environment, do we? Okay. So when we think of the subject of ecology, who here has heard of the subject of ecology? All right. So anytime you add ology afterwards, it usually means the study of, right? So ecology is generally defined as interrelationships of organisms with their environment and each other, okay? So in that study of ecology, we're looking at the environment. And we do it in different ways. You can scale up all the way to the whole planet, right, a biosphere, or down to individual populations, interactions, an ecosystem as well. So we can look at things like this. We can see how we may interact with the organisms around us. Who here eats? You guys eat? People eat, right? Okay. So you may interact with your environment through eating things, okay? Directly or indirectly. So a traditional view when we're researching these organisms is humans are at the top. So that figure I showed, we often put humans up there. So throughout history and science, so science history, if you study it, a lot of people have criticized science, saying that we rely too much on our biases when we ask questions. So it's from a standpoint of not only humans, but usually male humans. You see that there's a female below. So throughout history, so we're trying to rectify that. We want different perspectives. We want different ideas. So this is very much a Western science perspective, is to put humans. So as an example, when we talk about our impacts, right, whether they're positive or negative, it's usually from our standpoint of changing things. So humans are a dominating factor in a lot of ways when we're thinking about our interaction with the environment. So a different perspective, one that may add humans as part of the system rather than separate from it or an overseer of it, is one where we're embedded within the ecosystem. You might wonder, why does that matter? Well, things eat us, and it's important to recognize that things might eat us or parasitize us, or there are diseases that impact us, right? So if you start changing your mind around this perspective, we can ask different kinds of questions and look at different relationships and see ourselves differently in that ecosystem. So, okay, why is this Cherokee guy up here talking about all this? Well, one reason is we might have a different perspective. And I'm just one. We have a society of people not far from you that used to exist all through this area once upon a time that have a different perspective possibly. One where people are part of the ecosystem. One where an idea like du yang temps, where du yang temps is a perspective. It's a philosophy where we're in balance. And people that are anika duwagi, which is what folks call themselves, that are just not, they're not just political Cherokees. That's what we originally called ourselves. This is one perspective of living in balance. But we don't see ourselves as, we're not separate from nature or our ecosystem. We live within it, and there's an idea of tohi, or peace. So you live in an evenness. It's another perspective. We're not just consumers of food either. So you might see yourself at the top of food chain. You guys have heard that, right? Top of food chain. We're not just the top of the food chain. We're part of it. We're embedded in it. We're part of the cycle. And there's a reciprocity philosophy. And I'll get to this a little more, what this means. But basically, there's a direct and indirect interaction. There's a feedback loop. There's a perspective that we are part of this ecosystem, and it flows. Our actions influence the environment, and it can feed back on us, and it shapes us in return. There's this longer word here, okay? So I'll just bring something up about our language. It's really important. I think later Amber she's a lot more versed in the Cherokee language than I am. I am just a low-level learner, we call ourselves. But as I'm learning the language, I've realized that it's a very descriptive language. It's called a polysynthetic language. With our language, it's probably more descriptive than Latin. So as a scientist, it's very attractive in using Cherokee to explain things. Okay, so it's pretty cool. So if you take a long word like this is one of our words, or similar to some of our teachings or lessons that we have. I ask speakers to help me unpack it. So I've asked folks from Oklahoma, where I'm from, and in North Carolina. You can take part of the word and you can piece it out. Okay? You all to each other is data. Then, liskatani, depend. Dolhi is kind of like that word tohi you saw. So it can be peace or a cycle. So a speaker once told me it's a cycle. He would see a circle. Things are interacting. And then the last one, it usually follows a lot of our teachings from now until always, so always. So can you piece this together? So our language doesn't kind of go in the same order that English does, but you can get an idea what this is, right? This is a lot like the idea of reciprocity, except it's got a larger time scale. The other thing I was told is even though we're coming at this from an English-speaking mind, the interaction of these different parts of this word really matter. And some speakers will actually see pictures when they're saying things. It's verb-based, action-based language. So it's very powerful and when you describe things. So when you go out into your environment, rather than naming something, you make a description of it. So in Cherokee, that's what you do. So these are lessons handed down. So a stewardship perspective of Cherokees. We have a long history here. This is a really old map. It's called the Royce map. If you look into it here, you can see the states, the present day states. Cherokees once inhabited portions of 8 present day states. Didn't own it. That's a different perspective. We inhabited it, lived part of it. But some of the practices we might have implemented could have been sustainable. Fire is one aspect I'll talk about. Managing river cane or living part of the ecosystem in river cane, which is now at only 2% of its original expanse. Another idea is through stories or through perspectives. We can learn through organisms we have around us. Doyi, the beaver, makes dams. You guys all know that? You've heard beavers make dams, I hope. Okay, I don't have to go into a lesson about beavers. We make dams too. This here is a picture of the Gila Dam. All the Cherokee waters, some of them originate in the national park, end up at this dam. There could be problems with this. Can you guys think of any? Anyone? Fish passage, thank you, sir. Fish passage is a big one. If a fish goes over this dam, it's not going back, is it? Now, beavers can cause passage issues in some cases, but a lot of times when they dam up an area, it's kind of on the edge, and they'll have like a side channel go around them. Also in our area, what I've noticed is that their dams don't usually last long. They're blown out. They build it for a little while, and then they're blown out. I had an elder that I was talking to once at one of our mound sites. We were hanging out, and he was talking about a beaver that had created a small dam at a creek. And he said, what do people think of that? Because he knew what I did. I said, a lot of people don't like it. And he said, well, are they useful? I said, yeah. Out west, they would even drop them out of, I think, airplanes in boxes and parachute them down. It was quite a long time ago because they wanted to create habitat that beavers would create. So they're engineers of an environment, and they needed more aquatic habitat out west. So I said, yeah, they're useful. And he said, well, what happens when they create this habitat? I said, well, they create, their new waterfowl shows up you don't see anywhere else. Aquatic insects showed up that you don't see anywhere else. Aquatic macroinvertebrates. And you also might see new plants. And he said, are these some of them medicine plants? I said, I think so. This guy knew he was asking me to try to get me to think, right? He said, that's not how we do things. Because I said, people want us to kill them. They want us to remove them. He said, we don't do it that way. You see an opportunity here. The animal brought you something. Just because it eroded a little bit of a road and flooded part of somebody's field, because that's what happened, you should see the value of it. So the perspective and philosophy of adapting to your environment, the changes it might present you, is important. Doesn't mean you might want to eat one sometimes, that's okay. But just killing it without a real good reason, he said wasn't our way. So how do we balance our impact with nature? I think that's important. How do we balance that? We need to make decisions really carefully. Another idea of how people might build things is through fish weirs. Has anybody heard of a fish weir? There's a few people, so I'll explain it. Not very many people know what this is. In North Carolina, I think, has the highest density of these things. The PD has the most of anywhere, I think. But we have them in the Tuckasegee. We have them in the Little Tennessee. They're all over the place. If you look in rivers, you might see stacked rocks forming a V. And they're pointed downriver. And if you were to put a basket or a trap at the base of that V, where it has a slight opening, you could capture fish. Now, traditionally, people would have stacked up the rocks. Underneath the substrate, there's a base that's been constructed. And these things have been there for hundreds, maybe thousands of years in some cases. And there's people living today that remember using these. But now it's illegal because people were harvesting too many fish doing this. It turned into a market. But you could stack these up, but it's temporary. You do it during a time when you're getting a migratory fish through, like red horse, and catch your fill. Then you would take it down. So there's a process in place. You always take it back down. You put it back in balance, okay? You put it back the way it was. So you could pull the rocks up, and then you take it down. And so we still do reenactments today with kids. And they slap the water with river cane sticks, and we try to shoot some fish in. We don't ever really catch anything because we don't do it complete. But the idea is there. We try to teach people today how it works and why it's there. So what are the threats today? What are the threats that you guys see today? They're usually surrounded by this topic, the Anthropocene. And there's some disagreement on how this is, or even if it does exist, but I think we're all pretty clear in the idea that we're seeing big changes. One idea, the 5 key features of the Anthropocene, and this is a geologic episode, kind of like what killed dinosaurs, right? We have climate change, we have biodiversity loss, land use changes, resource extraction, and technological impacts. One of these alone may not do much, but all of these together are making big impacts, and we're seeing them to our biodiversity right now. So the question is, can we use indigenous knowledge to inform some actions? And I'm not going to cover each one of these, but I just want you to think about these impacts on our planet, locally or globally. One idea is through our oak hickory forests. So have you guys been in the woods around here? Who's been in the woods? You guys been in the woods? Okay. Have you seen rhododendron or laurel thickets? Okay, that's not normal. Historically, our forests would have had a lot more oak and hickory and chestnut. Chestnut's gone for the most part. But we had a wider open forest. And now we're surrounded by national forests and national parks that they sought out preservationist perspectives because there was over-extraction of our forest. So they sought out to protect and preserve our habitats, our environments. But what that did was it took humans out of the equation. Okay? And so what role could traditional practices play in restoring? Well, fire was a big part of the ecosystem for a long time, and humans usually made these fires. Bartram, have you guys heard of the name Bartram? When you're driving around, there's things named after Bartram. He was an early naturalist explorer through our area, and he talked to the Cherokees a lot, and he mentioned Cherokees making little fires wherever they went. You could use them for hunting, and you could use them to clear land. But that's what would clear the area. So if we could convince the federal managers to try something other than preservation, to try to include humans as part of the ecosystem, that fire could be useful, that would be an important tool. So traditional ecological knowledge has kind of become a catchphrase. I just like to call it knowledge, because everyone has knowledge, right? You guys have knowledge, I hope. But the folks that study this subject have tried to define it. And likely the idea of the same things I was talking about with coexisting with this environment. So it's a cumulative amount of knowledge, living body of information, beliefs and practices related to the environment. And these can be passed on through stories, legends, but also actions, activities that people have. These are relationships, just like I was saying, of living beings, including humans, so it does include people, with their environment. It's different than the experiential knowledge. So like if you have experience or your family has experience, and that it's longer term and it's a whole society of people, okay? So that's how this is different. One idea that I ran into when I first moved here that I'd never heard of, but once I heard this little saying, being a person that studied salamanders, it made sense to me that this was traditional ecological knowledge. Never drink water from a branch unless it's run over 5 rocks and a lizard's back. That's how I heard it. Lizard being a salamander, right? Local folks call them salamanders. So this makes sense. Salamanders are an indicator species, or indicator of good water quality. If they're present, it's pretty healthy usually. They have semi-permeable skin, so they breathe through their skin. They could take in a contaminant if it's around. So if they're not there, then I'd be careful of the water. And the 5 rocks, I think, may deal with siltation. I don't know. I speculate on that. But so if someone said this saying to some kids, maybe they would survive a little easier, right? They would drink water, clean water, a little easier. Another perspective is giving back. So this idea of reciprocity means that you're not just taking, you're giving, right? So it's about an idea of balance. I saw this poster up here about pollinators. I even took a picture of it. It's really great. You guys know about pollinators? Anybody? So pollinators, you usually think of the insects, right? So you have the bees and butterflies, right? But we also have little other insects, like even mosquitoes can be pollinators, but also bats, other mammals. And we rely on this interaction, right? So we can promote habitat for pollinators, and then they can help us by pollinating our food. So much of our food is driven by the act of pollination. So we have to have that. So this aligns with the modern conservation principles as well. So there's one person who was way ahead of his time, and I think people are still learning from this guy's perspective, and he learned a lot from tribes. And that's this guy named Aldo Leopold, the father of wildlife ecology. He was an ecologist. So some things he said was, a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of a biotic community. People should see land as a community, not a commodity, okay? So I think we can still learn from what he would say. And if you haven't read it, the Sand County Almanac is great. It's a very good thing to get into if you want to learn more. So the future of conservation, I feel like, is seeing yourself in nature, but also understanding by seeing yourself in nature that you're also part of science. Your observations matter. The information you gather matters. Every single person in here. Every one of you that has an experience, your experience matters. It needs diverse perspectives. And I want to make sure that you know that your perspective could really matter. So if you get into the field, you could be an ecologist, wildlife, fisheries biologist, park ranger, environmental scientist, and even teacher, okay? These are things that are very important and could help in using your observations. The idea of reconnecting people to place is important to me, and having a purpose when you do enter environments. We're connected to place through language, stories, and traditions. You can see this spot here in Oklahoma in the middle of the country. That's where I'm from, and that's my tribal boundary. So as an idea of endemic plants, endemic means they only exist there in that location. We don't have a lot of endemic plants in Oklahoma. We especially don't interact in the homeland. So we've lost these connections. So one of the things I'm trying to do is reconnect Cherokees back to the homeland. And even in the eastern band of Cherokee Indians, they exist in 1%, less than 1% of that homeland. So reconnecting is very important to me, and we can learn from the language to do that. So I want to just conclude that we're part of nature. How we live matters. How each of you lives matters. Your role matters in this ecosystem. So I encourage you all to explore, ask as many questions as you can. Don't be afraid. And stay curious. And with that, I really do appreciate your time, and I really appreciate the invitation to be here. Wadon, Shkin, and I'd take any questions if I have time. Anyone? Yeah. I think, so he asked, what could we do to help our environment? Well, I think staying curious matters. Like I said, learning. That way, I think if you take it on yourself, whatever you have in your environment, you'll understand the needs. There are simple things, of course. You know, creating a pollinator garden is one of them, right? So I mentioned pollinators being important, but find things that are important where you live. What are the things impacting your home area? You know, everyone has a voice, everyone has ideas, and I want you to come up with new ideas. That's how I want you to help. Got it? Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
So the elk are spreading throughout Haywood County, and that makes a lot of farmers worried. What would you tell a farmer about elk and what impacts that has on their farms?
Okay, elk are spreading through Haywood County, and it's got a lot of farmers worried, he said. What would I tell them? Well, if it was out west, insurance would help, you know. But if insurance doesn't cover it, you can protect them with electric fences. They do work. It depends on how big of a farm area you have. Where I grew up in Oklahoma, we had more fences. When I first moved here, one of the weird things I noticed was the lack of fences. So large wildlife, like elk, they do respond to electric fences. So they do work. It's a modern way of doing it. Sooner or later, you know, these elk might be more afraid of people. If there is hunting that happens, we hope that their behavior changes. But until then, electric fences work. Yeah. Anyone else? Well, I appreciate everybody. Oh, yes. What's my favorite organism? Man, why'd you ask that? That's horrible. To study? Well, you know, I work with all kinds of stuff, and it's like choosing a favorite kid. I love, well, flying squirrels are really cool. They're just harder to manage, you know, as far as data. They're cute, you know, cuddly. Hellbender salamanders are also one of the top ones I like working with. But yeah, probably hellbenders. Yeah, they're one of my favorites right now, today. Yes? Excuse. Oh, what made me choose this job? Oh gosh. Well, I didn't go into that, so thanks for asking. Well, as a biologist or the specific job?
This specific job.
Well, when I finished my PhD, I was looking to get out of academia. I wanted to do something I felt was really important, and I wanted to work directly with people. You know, and I wanted to see the results in front of me. And so a job opened up with the tribe, and I applied. And I'm Cherokee from a different tribe, and so I wanted to connect more. And I thought, you know, I knew I was going to have a kid, and now I have two, and I wanted to raise them around Cherokees. So being a part of a community really mattered to me, and also, this is one of the most biodiverse rich places in the country. I mean, and I like salamanders. It's the best place on the planet for that. So that had a lot to do with it. Yeah. Thanks. Anybody else? Yes. That's a great question. So she asked, what role do I see river cane in rebuilding the riparian zone since the hurricane? Right now, we don't know, but I've got a cool study going on, like 2.5 hours away, so it's not even around the tribal boundary, but there's a really cool study. We're looking, well, it's in Yancey County. The hurricane hit really hard there, right? And what's cool is the river cane stood still. And right now, there's not a lot of data about river cane all around. You could spend one weekend and read all the science there is about river cane. I'm serious. There's not a lot known about it. One of the things we want to prove is that question. We want to try to, and I know we shouldn't go out to prove it, but I want to see how valuable it is to riparian, because right now we throw out seed all the time in these riparian buffers. In some cases, isn't even native, because it grows fast and will help with stream bank stabilization. River cane's difficult, so it'll be hard to use for widespread management purposes, right? So for regulatory purposes or management purposes, I don't see it that feasible unless like a federal agency starts growing it in massive amounts and we can get a hold of it. Because where it sets right now, the science isn't good for propagation, and we don't have a source. So to answer that, it's going to be hard. We also need to make sure it is going to be good for that, because it doesn't, a lot of people think it has to be in water. It doesn't. It actually doesn't like to be right in the water. So it's, and I kind of wonder sometimes if it isn't along those banks, because that's where we've mowed it to, because I have other sites where it's a good 100 meters from the river in huge patches. So, 20 feet high, they're, yes.
Does the tribal boundary do any work with chestnuts?
Yes. The answer is yes. It's kind of an early project. We've got a project where they're trying to grow some right now, and they actually took over our deer pens. So we had a deer project where we were soft releasing deer, white-tailed deer, and they put it in an enclosure, and so we're growing it in there, trying to see how it'll do. Trying out some of those blight-resistant strains, but I don't have any updates on it yet, though, so I don't know where it's at. They're trees, take a long time, right? So, yes.
Talk a little bit about the historic role of fire in this region. A lot of people think that fire didn't exist in the mountains, that everywhere is supposed to be an old-growth forest here. So could you, maybe dispel that a little bit? Tell us about,
Okay.
Is fire supposed to be here in the mountains?
Is fire supposed to be here in the mountains? Yes. Yes. And there's fire archaeologists I've ran into, man. They study the role of fire. And what's crazy, so this is just on a side, I was at a meeting at University of Tennessee, and one of these fire historians was there. They bore into in different kinds of soil. There's soil that will retain that fire scar over time. And the idea, though, was fire important here? There are some fire-adapted species, but mostly I think the issue is reducing that understory, right? So we know things like white-tailed deer was common here. They're not now, okay? White-tailed deer, you might see a few, but they're not common compared to what they used to be, because they can't move through this environment, and understory growth is horrible. It's because of rhododendron and laurel thickets. And the one way, and so I read it, we've known this since the 60s. There was a study done that showed fire was very important for reducing the rhododendron and laurel thickets. But this archaeologist or fire historian I was sitting next to at a meeting, they gave a talk, and they handed out all of these charts of the timeline of fire, like the prevalence in our region. And I started looking at it while they were talking, and I marked on it different timelines And this was, since the 1700s or something, they were able to track. It was crazy, man. I marked on there, they said, hey, I want to talk to you. I said, I want to talk to you too. And I slid over the paper, and I had written where we lost half our population due to disease. Fire dropped. It was crazy. It was right then in the 1700s. And then, Indian Removal Act, it dropped again. So you could track it. It was crazy. So I think humans were a big part of this. We know it through people that took notes and, on the tribe. And people in memory right now, they know about fire. And they had a way of burning. So it's not just about putting a fire out there. It's when you burn, how you burn that matters. But now we're in this stage where we have fuel loads that are crazy. The Gatlinburg fires, hopefully they haven't, that's not out of our memory, because that was significant. These fires can destroy houses, and people are building on top of mountains now everywhere, and they are suppressing any kind of fire, and those fuel loads build up, and it's dangerous, right? So I could go on and on and on about this, but I think, we are in a place where we need to be burning more.
Fire is supposed to be.
Fire is supposed to be here. Yeah. I mean, all indications that I have are fire is supposed to be here. But I think you have to say that fire is supposed to be here with humans. So that's the part that we're missing. So you go to the national park, it's really hard. They'll burn, but it's really hard to convince them and the national forest to burn because they're in a preservationist management style. That means humans aren't part of this ecosystem. We're the opposite. Humans are part of this ecosystem. That's the whole talk I'm giving here. Yeah. Anything else? Yes. Ah, I like this guy. Okay, he asked a great question. Can I get to this? Do I have it? Okay, yes. He asked a great question. This is a fundamental ecology question that you just asked. Is the goal, and I think all managers, and you should teach this here at Haywood, I hope, what is your management goal? Because if you don't know it, developing all this doesn't matter, right? So he asked, is your goal to get back to the original or something else? So there's different management perspectives out there. There's a thing called shifting balance, or different, I could go into this, but in ecology, there's this perspective of different stable states, okay? So if you want to look up the term stable state, and you'll understand that sometimes we do shift into a different state over time naturally. It happens. We're in a different climate now. We're in a different time. I don't think we can go back to where we were. That's the short answer. The long answer is, I don't know where to go. That's the more complicated answer. Do we preserve biodiversity? That's the easier answer, right? Which means just more species, the better, right? And then, but living in balance, that philosophy is super important with all of that, right? So, don't eat yourself out of home. Don't live outside your means. Give back. So that whole idea, these are philosophies that are kind of difficult to get in your head, but I think we need that. And the rest will come. Yeah. Thank you very much. We're done.